What's going on, my beautiful people? Coach Will here. I hope all is well. And in this video, we're going to be discussing the key exercises that you need to start doing so that way you can build some nice, juicy, like horseshoe triceps. So with that being said, if you are new here, be sure to leave a like down below. Comment down below on what you would like to see me go over next. Subscribe, turn on post notifications, and do the whole thing. And even if you aren't new here, be sure to show some love down below. It really helps the channel grow so I can continue making content like this each and every single day. Now with that out of the way, we're gonna get straight into it. So when it comes to analyzing the triceps, we have to understand that the tricep is split up into two different muscle groups. The first muscle group being the short head of the tricep, and the second being the long head, which is the bigger meat right here of the tricep. These two muscles work synergistically within any sort of movement that incorporates the tricep. However, there are certain exercises that will help emphasize one area over the other. Vice versa, there are also exercises in which you will be able to place more load on the triceps versus directly isolating them. So with that being said, it's always important to keep in mind that when isolating the triceps or when trying to grow the triceps, we always want to start off with some form of compound movement. Now, when it comes to compound movements that we actually use as far as our triceps go, the number one exercise that I would recommend everybody try to implement in their routine is the dip. This could be unweighted or weighted. The dip by far is the king of all tricep exercises. It helps hit all of the heads of the triceps synergistically, and it allows you to use the most amount of load to overload the triceps, thus causing more growth in this area. On top of that, the beautiful thing about the dip is not only does it hit the triceps, it also hits the anterior deltoids, it hits the lower chest. It works all of these muscles together, so not only are you getting a lot out of your triceps, but you're also getting more bang for your buck when it comes to building your entire upper body as a whole. That being said, doing just dips alone will only get you about halfway to maximizing your true potential when it comes to your triceps. Understand that in order to really enhance the growth, unless you're somebody who has a genetic disposition to having just big arms by doing compounds, you'll need to toss in some form of isolation to help put the icing on the cake, to add the extra detail and to add the extra size that you may be looking for when it comes to building those big arms. That being said, we will now go into a possible variation that you could do when it comes to your triceps if for whatever reason you don't have access to a dip bar, or for whatever reason dips just don't settle well with you, because for some people maybe dips bother their shoulders, maybe it feels weird on their collarbone, maybe it feels weird on their rib cage, because dips, although the dips in my opinion are a fantastic exercise when done right and when optimized for one's anthropometry, one's body structure, it is also very important to do movements that are comfortable for you to do given whatever body structure you may have. Hence comes in our diamond push-up. The beauty about this movement is it's a push-up variation that can be done virtually anywhere, anytime. You don't need access to having two parallettes or any sort of dip stand. You could literally just go on the ground and bust out a couple right there and then. On top of that, no matter your strength level, you can always scale the exercise accordingly. So if for whatever reason you can't do dips or you can't do push-ups, you could simply convert over to doing them on your knees, and boom, there's the problem solved right there. So no matter where you're at, the diamond push-ups will always have you covered when it comes to building some solid triceps. Now, it's important to keep in mind that with most of these pushing compound movements, although yes, we are recruiting the triceps to a great degree, the problem with these movements, like I said previously, is you're failing to hit them in isolation. Meaning that if you're somebody who can't necessarily build big triceps through just these compound movements, you may need a little extra love and care to give to those areas in order for them to truly blossom to their peak potential. With that being said, this is where we bring in certain key exercises to help you enhance that. So the first exercise I have for you to help with isolating that tricep is some form of tricep extension. And this could be your traditional tricep push down with the cable, or this could even be, if you don't have access to a cable, a tricep extension on the floor. So with doing the tricep push down, it is important to use a load that is about light to moderate, something that we could do anywhere for multiple sets of 15 to about 20 repetitions. Reason why I wouldn't necessarily recommend going super heavy on these exercises is since we are doing some form of isolation movement for the triceps, if you overload those types of exercises, you might be putting yourself at risk of it getting some form of elbow inflammation or irritating that area, because the elbow joint itself isn't meant to do tons and tons of poundage through just extensions alone. That's the important distinction that we have to keep in mind when it comes to any form of isolation work for the majority of muscle groups in our body. When it comes to isolating a specific muscle group, remember that muscle groups aren't necessarily meant to be isolated with tons and tons of weight. So this is why we start off with a main compound exercise and then we carry over into an isolation movement to get more out of less weight, thus enhancing the growth potential of the specific muscle group that you're trying to enhance. On top of that, when we look at the tricep push down, this movement allows us to emphasize the short head of the tricep, or basically the outer head of the tricep right here, as you can see through my t-shirt, that kind of comes at you, that gives it almost that crab claw or that horseshoe aesthetic, you know what I'm saying? So with that being said, how do we go about enhancing the development of the long head of the tricep? Well, we can do this in two ways. The first of which is we actually want to start off with some form of compound movement that is done overhead. Hence comes in the overhead press, or what I personally like to do, the back to wall handstand push-up, or any form of handstand push-up variation. This could also be pike push-ups, elevated pike push-ups, and all those different types of variations to make sure that we also recruit a little bit of the long head, which is what really adds the size and the mass to your tricep muscle as a whole. So once we're done with the compound movements, we got to think of some form of isolation movement to do, correct? Well, in comes the overhead tricep extension. The overhead tricep extension being that one, it puts you in a overhead position, you're automatically placing more stress on that long head of the tricep. With placing more stress on the long head of the tricep due to the angle in which you position your body, you're automatically gonna put yourself in a position where you're enhancing that area, thus seeing more stimulus and more growth there. On top of that, keep in mind that with this movement, we really wanna focus on a nice, smooth, and controlled motion. Same goes for our tricep pushdown as well. I feel that when it comes to really isolating the triceps or isolating any muscle group in general, you really want to take your time. You don't want to treat it like you treat your main compound movements. With your main compound movements, you're trying to move as much weight as possible, as explosively as possible, to recruit maximal muscle fibers to fire all at once. Vice versa, when you're looking to isolate a specific muscle group, you really want to take your time. You want to make sweet, sweet love to the muscle. So that way it could break down, you're breaking down the muscle fibers. Thus, over time, as you break down the muscle fibers to its max capacity through these isolation exercises, you're gonna get more out of it versus if you were just to haphazardly do the motion. So, with that being said, let's say you don't have access to some form of cable apparatus in which you could do some form of tricep push down or overhead tricep extension. What do you do then? Well, in comes the bodyweight tricep extension. Pretty much you get the best of all worlds. You're hitting both heads of the tricep, the short and long head all at once. On top of that, if you wanted to emphasize one over the other, you can always just shift the position of your forearms to put it a little bit more forward if you want more long head action, or you could bring it a little bit closer towards your, you know, the stuff you got going on down there, your knees. Yeah, you thought I was good? Get your mind out the gutter, man. Anyway, you bring your elbows more towards your knees, you're gonna get a little bit more of the short head action. So, with that being said, the way you scale the exercise is obviously first you'll start off on your knees. Then from your knees, you'll extend your legs back. From the legs extended back position, you can then go into an elevated position in which you have a straddle stance, so basically a elevated plank. And then from there, you can bring your legs together to do the hardest variation, which even for myself is pretty hard. I could only bust out about 8 to 10 repetitions per set on this variation. So definitely a lot of room to grow with the bodyweight tricep extension. So definitely give those a shot if for whatever reason at this current stage you just don't have access to some form of cable apparatus. So my beautiful people, that wraps up the video. So just to recap everything that we discussed, remember that when we first start off, all of our tricep development, we want to focus on our key compound lifts first. So some form of horizontal press variation, whether this be the dip, which in my opinion is definitely preferable, but if the dip just doesn't work for you or you don't have access to parallettes or a dip stand, you can always do the diamond push-up. Second to that, we have some form of overhead press, whether it be a barbell, or if for whatever reason you don't have access to a barbell or all that stuff, you can always do handstand push-up variations to cover the long head of the triceps. Then from there, we want to focus on emphasizing the triceps through some form of isolation of the short head and the long head of the muscle belly. We do this through some form of tricep extension, whether this be a cable tricep push down or whether this be a cable overhead extension. The cable tricep push down is going to hit more of the short head. The cable overhead extension is going to hit more of the long head. And for whatever reason, if you don't have access to some form of cable apparatus, you can always do a bodyweight tricep extension and all its progressions. If you want to hit more of the long head of the tricep, you extend your arms outward, away from your body. If you want to hit more of the short head of the tricep, you bring it a little bit closer towards your knees. So with that being said, my beautiful people, that wraps up the video here. If you liked the video, leave a like down below. It really helps the channel grow. Subscribe, turn on post notifications if you are new. Also comment down below on what you would like to see me go over next. And with that being said, my beautiful people, in Will We Trust? Until next time.